Every year I always look forward for a new action game. Whether it's a hack and slash or a shooter game, I'm always gonna be there waiting for the game to show teasers, or better yet, release a demo. And last year, the game that took my attention the most was a game called Stellar Blade. A game that is clearly inspired by multiple different games that I'm well aware of. And obviously I got excited for the game because of that. And a month before the game releases and I got my hands on the demo, and it just fueled my hype even more for the game as I loved the visuals and the combat that the demo provided. So I pre-ordered the game, and to this day, this game stands as the only game I've ever pre-ordered. And I was not disappointed with the product I got. Fast forward almost a year after the release of Stellar Blade, and I'm still enjoying the game, despite finishing it twice already. And since this game is about to release on PC this June, I figured out that I wanted to make a video about this game before the PC release. So anyways, Stellar Blade is an action-adventure game made by a South Korean video game developer, Shift Up. Stellar Blade also likes to borrow elements from other genres such as RPGs, Souls-like, and hack and slash. And having played this game for 100 hours, I genuinely think that Shift Up just wanted to make a cool sci-fi action game with an eye candy of a protagonist. And I think that they did a home run for this game. Now, the game isn't perfect by any means. After all, this is Shift Up's first AAA title. But on the other hand, the fact that this is their first AAA title, and the game is this polished while having a really fun and complete experience is such a great accomplishment on by itself. And despite its flaws, I still love the game for what it is, and I assume a lot of people would too. So with this little essay video I made, I hope that I could share what made Stellar Blade so awesome for me and how it could be awesome for you who's watching this video as well. So without further ado, let's begin. The story of Stellar Blade is set in a post-apocalyptic future where Earth is overrun by aliens called Naytibas. We follow a female protagonist, Eve, who is a battle angel, which is basically an android specifically designed to fight these so-called aliens from Earth. And throughout the main story of the game, Eve is gonna find allies to help her such as Adam and Lily. The main story of Stellar Blade is basically Eve trying to find and kill the Elder Naytiba in hopes to put a stop in the reproduction of Naytibas, while at the same time uncovering the secrets behind why humanity lost from the aliens and what really caused the downfall of Earth. Now, the story of Stellar Blade wasn't really its biggest strengths, and this is why I see some people who played Stellar Blade confused with the whole plot behind the game, and I can see why. But my main problem was that the character writing behind Eve felt kind of undercooked. It also doesn't help the fact that Eve doesn't really have a backstory either. All we know is she's close with a character called Taki, and that she's a battle angel, just like any battle angels in the story, who is oblivious about the whole story behind what really happened before the events of the game. Which is interesting, I guess, because of the fact that the main antagonists of the game, which are Raven, Mother Spear, and Elder Naytiba, are all written well. They have motivations and a lot of backstory, and they are all connected to each other. Compare that to Eve, and Eve feels like as if she's not attached to the lore and story in the first place. It's as if she's unimportant, until of course the final events of the game where she's finally relevant because of how the story turned out. Which you could say is made on purpose because the battle angels are supposed to be in a suicide mission anyways, and Mother Spear can just make more battle angels to complete the mission. But I think that still doesn't justify the fact that we know almost nothing about Eve and her relationship with Taki, whom she's supposed to be really close with. But aside from that, I think the story still turned out to be great. Not to mention the lore and backstory before the events of the game was well written in my opinion. That it's kind of a shame since a lot of people might miss a lot of the lore because it's hidden through environmental storytelling and documents you can find throughout your progression. This is kind of like the equivalent of Dark Souls hiding super important parts of the story behind item descriptions. Another thing is that the character designs in this game also tells a story and hints a lot about the lore of Stellar Blade. An example of this is compared to most of the characters in the game, Adam somehow is the only one who looks like a real human, while the other look kind of uncanny or android-like. Like the Battle Angels, for example, their faces are designed as perfect as possible to the point that they look artificial in an uncanny way. I assume that the designers used the South Korean beauty standards as a reference to make the faces of the Battle Angels, like giving them small nose, big eyes, in the most perfect shape possible, and that's why the Battle Angels look very artificial, which makes sense since they are made by a super AI who is also Mother Spear. Meanwhile, Adam's human-like appearance makes sense because it turns out that he's the only human alive in existence, and he is also the Elder Naytiba, which means all of the aliens or the Naytibas that we've killing throughout the game were the past humans all along. It's also worth mentioning that this game has a total of 3 endings, and it's based on your decision at the very final act of the game, so you don't have to worry much about your decisions throughout the game, except at the last part, which the game will make it obvious for you that it's gonna cause different outcomes. There's also a secret story with Lily, and you can unlock it if you manage to max out her affection level. Note that this is also unlocks the 3rd ending, which is the canon ending for the game. But all of that aside, there is still a lot of unanswered questions in the story, and especially since we never really get to fight Mother Spear. I think that Shift Up is saving it for the future, especially since they already teased a potential sequel. So I think it's safe to say that you could look forward for a direct sequel for this game. I love the world and aesthetic of Stellar Blade, and I love how the developers are aware of this and are not scared to show off here and there. And the different vibes you get from every levels, like the ruined and flooded cities of Eidos 7 and Eidos 9, to the dry lands of Great Desert, to the cyberpunk city of Zion, and my favorite part of this game, which is the final segment in the Orbit Elevator. Like, the locations in this game are surprisingly diverse, and they still manage to place the story in such diverse areas, and I just can't help but appreciate it. And the level design for the linear levels and open world levels are both amazing, that I hardly find myself getting lost while exploring because almost every area is filled with detail and is very distinct from each other, that it's super easy to remember which area is which. A thing that might turn off some players though is that this game uses yellow paint to hold the hands of the player. But while I appreciate that they tried giving it a lore explanation as to why yellow paint exists in the world, I would still much rather prefer no yellow paints at all. They could have just made the drone or Adam hint that there is an area that you might be interested checking on, and that would be a great way of hand holding without completely breaking the immersion of the player. But then again, I would guess that that would take much more time and budget to do, but it's still a much better and preferable way than the good old yellow paint in my opinion. But speaking of yellow paint, this paint mostly guide you through secret locations that might have secret collectibles or puzzles around the world, especially the open world areas and quest lines. And speaking of quest lines, the NPC quests in this game are somewhat Nier fashioned, because if you're not familiar with quests in Nier series, the quest in that game basically starts somewhat innocent, then ends with a bitter taste in your mouth because of how it turns out at the end. Stellar Blade also does that, but not necessarily all the time, as the world of Stellar Blade isn't really trying to be as bleak as Nier's, but Stellar Blade still has its fair share of very bleak quest lines here and there. But you'd still be surprised with the amount of quest endings with a bittersweet or somewhat wholesome of an ending, which keeps me very interested. Another thing that is worth mentioning is that this game also has side quests that doesn't really give much rewards because these are just filler quests. Like, you don't have to do it unless you really need the rewards. But some of these side quests can still be interesting, but it's very hit or miss. And honestly, I can't really find any other weakness in the world of this game. Maybe just aside from the yellow paint stuff that they tried to justify by giving it lore. But this game is straight up something I would love going back to after a couple of months or a year just to experience it for a moment again and again. The gameplay is where Stellar Blade truly shines, and especially since Stellar Blade has one of my favorite gameplays and progressions hands down, as the game takes a very unique approach to its progression. Now I don't know how unique it is, but I'm sure that this is the only game that I experience with this kind of level progression. Because while the game is indeed an action-adventure game at its core, it also likes to borrow some elements from other genres like RPG, Souls-like, and hack and slash, mixing small bits of it into one game. There are different world levels in this game, like 4 linear but open-ended levels, and there's 2 small open world levels, all of which you are free to explore to your heart's content, as all of these levels has secrets that might hide from you if you're not paying close attention. All levels obviously has multiple different bosses, and what's cool about these levels is they somehow are able to diversify the enemy types in each levels that makes traversing through these different levels not feel repetitive. There's also a hub area called Zion, but this is mainly where the RPG elements of this game takes place, as you can find and interact with NPCs and take quests from them and the quest board. There's also affection levels for some NPCs, but this isn't for romancing since this game doesn't have romance stuff. The affection level really just affects the amount of stuff the NPC sells to you, and that's it. But while the game has some RPG elements with it, the leveling system in Stellar Blade is quite different from your traditional action RPG since you really don't level up Eve. You get a skill tree instead where you can unlock combo routes or skills using skill points you get from completing quests and defeating bosses. But you do, however, level up Eve's sword using a material you get from defeating bosses. And there's a total of 5 skill trees in this game. But you only start with 3 and you unlock the other 2 from progressing throughout the game. Stellar Blade also does something similar to a traditional action game like Devil May Cry, where you need to pick up a certain amount of collectibles to upgrade your max HP and other stuff. One thing I really love about the gameplay of this game is that you can change Eve's functionality the way you want her to. With the different exospines and gears you can change around to decide what's gonna be the strength of your character will be. This is basically the equivalent of building your character in this game, as you can build Eve to be strong at doing melee combos, or you can build Eve for stealth. Though all of these builds becomes irrelevant in my opinion when you find yourself in a skill check boss fight, where you have to change up your build to a specific kind of build since you can only play one playstyle when fighting a boss fight, since there is no way you're gonna kill the boss using a stealth build. But instead, the game encourages you to play different playstyles in different situations. Like if you're playing against a boss fight, you might want to use a parry and combo focused build. And if you're in the open world, however, doing quests, you might want to go for a stealth and projectile build. This is such a great way of letting the players be creative and find ways to take advantage of the different gears and exospines they find in their adventures to their advantage. Another thing though is that this game really shines in New Game Plus, because I feel like a lot of the gameplay content is locked behind New Game Plus. Like having access to a better version of your beta skills, which will literally alter the animation of the skill itself. Different and some even better versions of the costumes, and a Mark II version of the exospines and gears in the world, which will give you the definitive version of the gameplay of Stellar Blade. Another part of the gameplay that I really love is the boss fight, of course, because the boss fights of this game is hands down one of the most consistent boss fights I've ever experienced in an action game. Like, to be honest, I can't really say if there's any bad boss fight in this game, because from start to finish, the boss fights is always fair but serves a great challenge. There's also some gimmick boss fights in the game, but that's because you can find these gimmick boss fights in a gimmick area where you can't use swords, so they are designed to be only fought with your hand cannon. But sticking to this game will reward you some of the best boss fights experiences and designs you will find in an action game, since most of the best boss fights are found in the later stages of this game. But all of the bosses, and I mean all, in the later stages are phenomenal. Belial, Democrawler, Elder Naytiba, and the rival fight of this game, which is Raven, with that sick ass theme while you fight her. Like the first time I encountered Raven, I was just bopping my head with her theme as she beats the hell out of me, since she also happens to be one of the hardest, if not the hardest boss fight this game has to offer. And finally, you can never forget the greatest part of Stellar Blade's gameplay, which is the fact that you can play dress up with the costumes you find throughout your exploration. Speaking of themes, this game has one of the most unique OSTs out there in my opinion, and honestly this game might just have my favorite OSTs I can ever find in an action game. It's diverse, unique, and very catchy. It's like a mix of Nier inspired music with K-pop and electro. Like I can't even describe it because the genre of music this game has is just so diverse, and all of them are straight banger after banger. They have somber and melancholic music to match the vibes of the bleak situation this game takes place in. They also have electro with rock to hype you up while you're fighting a boss fight, and you cannot forget the trailer music that instantly hooked all of us Stellar Blade fans. And the best out of the bunch is Raven's boss theme. I mentioned it already, but it's so good that it deserves to be mentioned again, especially since in my opinion, Raven's boss fight is one of the most hyped moments in Stellar Blade, and it definitely deserves an incredible OST to pair with. The combat of Stellar Blade didn't have the complexity I expected it to have, but that's not to say that the combat design is bad. In fact, I'm somehow in love playing around this game, and a big part of that is the combat design itself. In a nutshell, the combat of Stellar Blade is in between of Sekiro and a hack and slash game, where the main focus is parrying and deflecting, but the twist is you can perform hack and slash combos as your reward for performing successful parries. Mainly we have perfect parries and different combo strings that would generate what this game calls a beta energy, which is basically a skill gauge where you can use certain moves in exchange for some beta energy. And there is 4 different beta skills, and there's extensions out of perfect dodging and parrying that uses beta energy. So basically you still have creative freedom and self-expression for combos in this game despite being a parry focused game. Another kind of skill gauge is burst energy, which offers a stronger and more potent set of skills and follow-ups. But the difference is burst energy is harder to get as you can only get it through perfect dodging attacks. And while there's different attacks in this game that is non-parryable and is strictly dodgeable only. This is basically the equivalent of Mikiri counter in Stellar Blade. And there's 3 versions of dodgeable only attacks in this game, which is the yellow flash attacks, the blue one, and the purple one. The yellow flash is only dodgeable with perfect dodge. The blue is only with a forward dash like a Mikiri counter, and the purple one is with a backward dash, all of which will give burst energy. Another way to get burst energy though is when you do combo strings and you hold the final swing of it and the attack glows red. So everything has its specific use in the combat of this game. There's also some combos you can do as long as you save enough energy to do so. You can see some in my gameplay playing in the screen right now. It's also worth mentioning that the parrying in this game is really similar to Sekiro, in a sense that successive perfect parries would lead your opponent to get staggered and gives you the ability to perform a riposte animation. And it's also cool that the riposte animation is always different depending on the enemy you're fighting. Another part of your arsenal is your grenades and the hand cannon. I mentioned it before. You can incorporate this in your combos against boss fights, but it's very limited, and this is mostly used outside of boss fights. Consumable grenades, however, are very useful for boss fights because it can knock them down, which gives you a window to perform combos. And lastly is the Taki mode, which is basically the devil trigger of this game if you play Devil May Cry, or like the Spartan Rage if you play God of War. Basically, Eve gets enhanced moves and attacks and makes the gameplay purely hack and slash. And honestly, I don't think Taki mode is incorporated well into the combat of this game, in my opinion, and I only really use it as a panic button as it doesn't really work with the combos you can do in this game. And in this mode, Eve is basically unstoppable and quite literally immortal, like you don't have to parry at all, you just have to spam your skills and attacks. And like, the mode has no flaws whatsoever, so I don't exactly understand how I could incorporate this mode to my gameplay aside from it being my panic button, or let me get out of this situation button. But anyways, while the combat of Stellar Blade might not be as deep as other action games such as DMC or Ninja Gaiden, Stellar Blade still has, in my opinion, a well-rounded and very experimental combat design, where you can express yourself with the creative combos you can do. Sure, it could still see some improvements, but that doesn't take away the fact that playing around the combat of this game is fun and rewarding. So yeah, that's what made Stellar Blade so awesome for me. Thank you for watching, and if you've reached this far, thanks for sticking by. I would like to shout out a commenter from my last video, Killer Wolf 3048. If you're watching, I promise you that as soon as I get myself a PC, my very first project is going to be Metal Gear Rising. But anyways, if you've enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and because this kind of videos takes a lot of time to make. But anyways, see you on the next one.